Can you name one company that you would buy now and hold for 10 years? Is it Evolution AB?
It could be Evolution AB. Let's also give another example, maybe, because
Yeah.
otherwise we talked about it quite a lot. One other company that truly stands out for me as well is Kinsale Capital. I'm not sure whether you know the company, Emmet.
Would you believe both of those companies have been pitched by me in Horizon and have been bought by me in Horizon? Kinsale Capital is an absolutely wonderful business, but I'll let you do the talking. Welcome back to Stock Club. 2 weeks ago, Mike and I announced Investicon, our big ticket event happening on the floor of the Irish Stock Exchange on Thursday, August 21st. So just over 2 months from now. The idea is simple. We're gathering elite minds in stock investing, AI, and collectible whiskey to share their top 3 investing ideas for 2026 and beyond. This week, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by someone I've admired from afar, Pieter Slegers, the founder of Compounding Quality, which, if you're on Substack, needs no introduction. Peter's investing newsletter, Compounding Quality, is ranked number 1 for stocks on Substack, and his insights have amassed a loyal audience of over 1 million followers. So Peter's flying to Dublin this August to share his top investing ideas live at Investicon. And today we're going to get a taste of how he thinks about finding outstanding stock market investments. Peter, welcome to Stock Club.
Thanks, Emmet. It's an honor to be here. And I also need to congratulate you because I think you did a tremendous job pronouncing my last name. Probably in whichever podcast I've been, nobody has done it as well as you so far. So congrats.
And well, I'm not going to divulge how I figured it, but thank you for that, Peter. Well, you are best known for, I think, your Substack Compounding Quality, which I happened across a couple of years ago. And for those who are not subscribed, could I start by asking you, in the name Compounding Quality, what does quality mean to you in an investment?
Sure, it's an important question because probably when you ask 10 different investors what is the definition of quality investing, you will get 10 different answers. Well, one of the most famous quality investors probably, yeah, is Warren Buffett, because I also think he's a quality investor. But quality investor in the new sense of the word, it's probably Terry Smith. And well, quality investing is all about investing in the best companies in the world. So meaning you don't try to find the next big thing. You don't try to find the next Nvidia or the next Amazon, but you invest or try to invest in companies that have already won, meaning companies that have a very strong track record, that are very profitable, that have been outperforming the market for a very long time, often very boring companies. And then you just, yeah, stick to those companies, let them grow their intrinsic value, and let them keep doing their thing. So I always say, well, we do that based on 3 steps, and it's based on Terry Smith. So the first thing is the wonderful companies, so the great companies. Second point is something that I think is very underestimated, and that's the skin in the game part. So you want to invest in companies where management is also, yeah, invested in the business, where the majority of their net worth is invested in the company they manage. And then the third point is valuation. So first you look at the quality of the business, and afterwards only you look at the valuation. And don't get me wrong here, I'm not saying, or I'm not thinking that valuation is not important, because even the best company in the world can be a horrible investment if you pay too much. But the key thinking or the key rationale here is, first we want to identify the great companies. A lot of those companies are way too expensive. They are too richly valued. But Mr. Market is volatile. Sometimes he's optimistic, sometimes he's pessimistic. So the key thinking is, well, maybe, for example, Copart, the US company that is the eBay for total loss cars, is too expensive right now. But the market is volatile, and one day, yeah, the market might be very pessimistic about Copart, and that might be a great time to buy the company. So once you've already identified that it's a great business, then you can just sit back and wait for the market to hopefully offer you some great opportunities over time.
No question about it. And we're big fans of Copart here at My Wall Street. And it's one of the first stocks that we highlighted many, many years ago when we launched our flagship product, which at the time was called Invest. And one of the things, Peter, that you've always emphasized in all of your writings was that long term mentality, which is why I believe we're very spiritually aligned as investors. So, what specific traits do you look for when searching for a multi-bagger? So I understand what you're saying about finding quality businesses with
Mhm.
uh, preferably founding CEOs who have a meaningful stake in their business, having invested in that business in so many ways. But what about those earlier ones? Like one of the many great businesses that you pointed out very, very early in its journey was Games Workshop, which was a
Mhm.
small cap, micro cap probably when you spotted it. It's grown dozens fold since. What traits do you look for when looking for these potential multi baggers?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the main problems of investing and investors in general is that you think too much on the short term. So
Mm-hmm.
one aha moment for me was when I was at the Goldman Sachs offices in London.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always a bit young, a bit naive. I was still working in the asset management industry, by the way, so involved in managing an equity fund. And I was a bit young, a bit naive, a bit arrogant, meaning, look, I know the data, I know the statistics. Most investors underperform the market, but I've read everything of Warren Buffett, I've read everything of Charlie Munger. I'm different, and I will show them how it's done. That's a bit how I joined the industry initially, naive and a bit arrogant, probably. And then I went to the Goldman Sachs offices in London, and there you saw thousands of professional investors sitting in one big aula, one big audience. And all of them were very smart, very hardworking, very ambitious, probably all working 70, 80 hours. And I was looking in the room, and the data state that 90%, 90% of all investors underperform the market. So I was looking around, and when you notice that 1,000 people are sitting there and 900 of them will probably do worse than the market, well, it made me a bit afraid, meaning I'm not different. I'm probably even dumber than those guys. So what am I doing here? And I think that using a long-term mindset can makes the investment game a lot easier, because 90% of investors aren't doing that. And when you're focusing too much on quarterly results, when you're focusing too much on what's happening in the short term, well, investing is very hard, and I don't think you can can outperform the market. It's what Jeff Bezos said. Well, markets are highly competitive, but when you think with a 7 or 10 year mindset, well, almost no one is doing that, and that creates a competitive advantage for you as an investor. So things get way easier there. And I think when we talk about quality investing, well, the most important thing for a quality investor definitely is the moat or the competitive advantage. Meaning you want to invest in a company that's very unique, where competitors can take away the market dominance they have right now. And in finance, you have a term called reversion to the mean, meaning when something does really well for a very long period of time, well, competitors or potential competitors will also see that, and they will enter the market. But the beautiful thing is, and that's why it's so important, when a company has a competitive advantage, it's so strong, well, other companies also see that, and they will try to attack the company. They will try to attack the moat. But when the moat is wide enough, when the moat is strong enough, they just can't compete, and that company keeps winning. That's why I said in the beginning, well, we don't want to invest in the next big thing. We want to invest in companies that have already won.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing, for example, also is you have a very interesting paper, a very interesting study from Michael Mauboussin, who said
Mm-hmm.
when you have a company with a high return on invested capital, which is a great metric and one of the most important metrics for a quality investor, well, reversion to the mean doesn't take place. And you already touched upon that, for example, with Games Workshop. I think that's an excellent example, because a funny story there, just to highlight the moat. Well, I think 7, 8 years ago, well, I had a new girlfriend, and it was the first time that we need to go to a family party together. And it's the first time with your girlfriend. Obviously, you want to have a great impression. And there were 20 people at the party, and everything was going well. We seemed to get along well. They seemed to like me, and so on. And then you had one uncle who was interested in investing and interested in stock markets.
Okay.
So it
I've
goes
been
without,
there, very interested. So
yeah,
how did that play out?
yeah, it goes without saying that we started talking and started talking, and all of a sudden, well, I brought up Games Workshop because I
Mm.
thought it was a great company and so on. And he said, well, I know Games Workshop. And that was surprising to me because, as you mentioned, well, it was a very, very small company, definitely a few years ago. And we started talking for a bit about Games Workshop, and all of a sudden he started shouting at me. You are a very bad person, Peter. Do you know that? You are horrible. Where are your ethics? And blah blah blah. And all of a
What?
sudden, the entire table went silent and started looking at me. But remember, it was the first time that I was at a family party, right? And but then he started laughing and he said it was just a joke. But it turned out that he was a very loyal Games Workshop player. And to make things even
Really?
worse, he hired three garage boxes in Antwerp. I live in Belgium, just to
Yeah.
store all his miniatures of Games Workshop.
What?
So maybe I should have highlighted that in the beginning. So Games Workshop is a company that makes, yeah, that is active in board games, and you can buy
Yeah.
miniatures and so on. And the point that Uncle made is, well, every single year, Games Workshop increases its prices by 4-5%. And all the
Really?
players hate it, but they end up or they keep buying the game anyway because, yeah, you have the network effects there, and all your friends are there, and they want to keep playing and playing. And he even compared Games Workshop or their products a bit to cigarettes, meaning, and cigarettes is it's a bad business, right? It's very
Mm-hmm.
unethical. But
Mm-hmm.
when someone starts smoking, he usually smokes the same brand until he stops or until something happens to him. So they are very loyal towards the
Yeah.
product, and that's the same
Oh,
for
yeah.
for Games Workshop. And by the way, for example, not sure if it's an interesting fact as well. So Philip Morris, for example, is the best performing stock in the US over the past century. So having those very loyal customers in combination
Mm.
with pricing power, what Philip Morris has, for example, but also Games Workshop, well, those are, yeah, the kind of characteristics that you want as an investor, or at least as a quality investor.
I was in Regensburg in Germany last October, I think it was. I was walking through the streets with my wife, and there was a Games Workshop shop
Hmm.
there. And I said, "Oh, we have to look at this." And as you know only too well, tiny retail, tiny footprint, one member of staff selling these
Hmm.
collectible figurines or whatever they're called for primo pricing, and that thing was printing money, and it's just unbelievable. You've added a lot of color. My equivalent to that was many, many moons ago. Marvel of superheroes fame was
Hmm.
about to go bust. It was an independent company, and it was selling pennies on the dollar. It was a couple of bucks for a share. And the catalog of superheroes, the intellectual property that this business had, was worth an astronomical amount, whereas the actual book value of the business was nothing. So I went in heavy, and I remember talking to a whole bunch of MBA graduates when they were looking for a stock recommendation. And I'm probably talking 15 or 20 years
Hmm.
ago. And I said Marvel, which like was guffawed and laughed. You're talking about Spider-Man, is it? I actually, I felt donkey's ears grow out of my head because they were so deriding of the idea. But as time went by, it came to fruition. Disney bought it. It was one of the best investments I made that year. And I look at Games Workshop as the one that got away because I remember having a similar view of it many moons ago before it went through multifold growth, and it's still a wonderful business. You're talking about sitting in a room full of other Goldman at that Goldman event,
Hmm.
and you were saying like you're no more intelligent, which I beg to differ. But one of the things that I guess you need to do is at least make less mistakes than all of these other ladies and gentlemen, especially when you're swinging for the fences. So, my question to you is, what's the most common trap that, let's just say investors, I don't even want to say you, but most investors fall into when they're hunting for a compounding machine, or indeed a business that has the attributes of a 10xer?
Sure. For me, probably the answer would be linked a bit to the previous question. Take the Games Workshop example again. Games Workshop has been a 100 bagger, so it
Mm.
decreased by 100x, and
Not
you
bad,
only
not bad.
yeah, exactly. You only need one company like
Mm.
that goes 100x during your entire investment career to be successful. It's the same with Berkshire Hathaway. Charlie Munger said that if you take away the 14 best investments of Berkshire Hathaway, well, nobody or most people would have not heard about Berkshire Hathaway. I'm going every year to the AGM, to the shareholder meeting in Omaha physically, so it's a
Mm.
20-hour trip one way. People wouldn't have done that if you would take away the best investments of them. So I think the main mistake I see people make is indeed to have a short-term mindset, start to worry when things start to go south. One framework I love is from Francois Rochaud from Giverny Capital. He's also a quality investor, and
Mm.
he's been around, or he's making this table since the late 90s, and every year he compares the stock price or the performance of his fund with the evolution of the intrinsic value of the companies he owns. And he calculates the evolution of the intrinsic value in a very simple way. It's just the EPS growth plus the dividend yield. And what you see every single time is that in the short term, well, the stock prices and the stock market goes everywhere. Sometimes the intrinsic value goes up by just saying something 20% and the stock price is down 10%, or the other way around. But in the long term, it's almost identical. So, in other words, in the long term, stock prices always follow the evolution of the intrinsic value.
Mm. Mm.
And Emmet, we are probably doing something similar. So with compounding quality, also people can see my portfolio, investment cases, and so on. And there's also community. So for every stock we own, there's a dedicated space where all the news is published, where people can ask questions about the company and so on. And what
Mm.
I see every single time is it's very, very silent in the spaces of the stocks that are doing well, really well. It's very silent in the Games Workshop channel, for example.
Hmm.
But when we
Oh,
own a
yeah.
company that is going south, when the stock price isn't doing well, that's space and that conversation is very vibrant. And all of a sudden, a lot of people are bringing up all the negative things about the company, and to me, that's funny. And
Mm.
I will make it a bit more practical. For example, I'm still invested in Evolution AB, for example. Evolution AB
Oh, and
has,
so am I. So am I, through
I didn't
Horizon, the
know.
service. Yeah. So her Evolution, I've bought it repeatedly. Um, trying to catch a bottom, but I still, yeah. Anyway, sorry, I interrupt you. Tell me.
No, same for me, and also bought repeatedly. So we're on the same
Mhm.
site, so that's great
Yes.
to see. But then you also see in that community, a lot of people are publishing articles about risks for potential risks and
Mm.
potential downsides of Evolution AB. And it's true.
Mm.
There is some. So Evolution AB, by the way, for those that don't know, it's a Swedish company that is a online casino operator. It's not a casino itself, but they help online casinos to operate their games, like a live roulette table or live blackjack table, for example. And there is some regulatory risks, there are some strikes in the Eastern Europe countries and so on. And that's all true, but those risks were also there 3, 4 years ago. And when
Mm.
things were still going well, nobody talked about them. And now everybody's talking about them, but the valuation came down, well, by 50, 60% or even more. And I think Evolution AB is also a perfect example. This company is really cheap right now. It's almost at 10 times earnings when you look a bit out, when you look at the expected earnings over the next 12 months. Well, so the intrinsic value is keeps going up, so they are still
Yeah.
growing. It's a
Yeah.
bit harder, okay, but they are still growing. But the valuation goes like this. So basically, you have a
Yes.
situation where the company becomes worth more and more and more, and the stock price keeps going down, down, down. I remember normally, and I truly believe that's the case, yeah, the stock prices follow the evolution of the intrinsic value. So as long as Evolution AB keeps growing its fair value, keeps growing its
Mhm.
intrinsic value, it's only a reason to buy more than a reason to panic about the potential downside risks. At
It's
least if
funny
you
you
ask
should
me.
mention it. Apart from you mentioning it unprompted by me, so too did Bill Mann, who's works for the Motley Fool and is formerly their head of growth investing and international investing and the Motley Fool asset management business. He was their managing partner. And when we were on stage in the Irish Stock Exchange, as it
Mhm.
happens I think it was last November, I asked Bill, what's your absolute favorite? What are your favorite two stocks? And in the hyper risky category, he chose CRISPR Therapeutics, which I'm a fan of.
Mhm.
And he then went Evolution AB.
Yeah.
And Bill has been investing he ran a service 20 years ago called Global Gains for the Motley Fool, which had absolutely magical results. And he has traveled the world, as have you, as have I, meeting the management teams of these businesses. And at that time, he also said it was his favorite. You're saying it to me now. I've said it to my subscribers. And yet, what you and if Bill was here and I all acknowledge is we might be wrong, but
Mhm.
it's unlikely. It's a game of probabilities. Where
Yeah, true.
this business is getting better. Its EV divided by EBITDA is just going down, 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 which is a trend line that kind of, I suppose, somewhat reflects the value of the business at a historical level.
Yeah,
So
true.
let's just talking about valuation there, Peter. A great business can still be a poor investment if it's bought at the wrong price. And you touched on this, and I know from your service and as a subscriber to Compounding Quality, you keep a very good track on that very metric.
Mhm.
Quality businesses need to have a great price. What's your approach to valuing compounders?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, the best company in the world can be a horrible investment if you
Mm,
pay too much. Look at what happened with Coca-Cola in the 70s, Walmart that went nowhere
mm.
between 2000 and 2015. So
Wow.
0% return over
Same with
15% per year.
Microsoft, 16 years flat
Yeah,
before it went on to become one of the greatest investments of all time.
exactly. And we can say, well, we know that it happens from time to time and so on and so on. But when you're in there and
Mm.
experiencing it for 15
Yes,
years, things
it's
start to
ugly.
get tricky. So
Mhm.
it's important to also take valuation into account. And I also think, by the way, that for some quality investments or quality stocks, that's an issue right now. So, for example, if you have Fair Isaac, for example,
Mm,
Fico,
mm,
those companies are Hermes, same thing, so beautiful businesses. But when there isn't a return for 10 years because of the valuations coming down, I don't think investors can argue a lot with it because just the valuation is so expensive that it could happen. So just to make the point, well, valuation is still important. We can't ignore it at all. Um, I am a very huge believer in, well, as John Keynes said it, well, it's way more important to be roughly right than exactly wrong. To give an example, well, while still working in the industry, you have those complex Excels of 700 rows trying to estimate the intrinsic value to two decimal spaces. And if you ask me, that doesn't make any sense. So also a fun thing there is so I was working on the buy side, meaning that you are managing money and you're actually making investment decisions. And you also have the sell sides, and those are the people who are making writing reports and so on. So the
mm,
people like myself back then, the buy side, they read the reports from the sell side. And there was a report on a company, and it was a quality company as well, but it was rather expensive. I was looking at his model and looking at his assumptions, and in year 5, in his valuation model, he all of a sudden assumed that, well, they should keep growing from year 5 by 3 extra percent per year because of M&A. But it came out of nowhere because the company never did any M&A. It didn't make a lot of sense. So I emailed
mm.
him. So I don't get why in your model you assume a 3% growth rate from M&A starting from year 5. And his response, literally, I still have the screenshot from the email, was, well, I know, but when I didn't do it, when I didn't include this in my model, my fair value was too far away from the current stock price. So he just said, well, I couldn't make any sense of the stock price, so I just put something in
Mm.
just to get close to the stock price. So that makes no sense at all. And it also
Yeah.
shows how many of those houses are working. They're always running behind the stock price, trying to stay close to it, because there's a funny saying on Wall Street, well, nobody got fired from buying IBM or Apple
Oh
or
yeah.
Amazon in today's world.
Yeah.
So everyone they don't want to take any risks. But anyway, I always use the same 3 models to value a company. The first
Mm.
one is very easy, very naive, and just compare the forward PE multiple with its historical average.
Mm. Mm.
It doesn't tell you everything because it doesn't take into account what's happening at the company, the outlook, which might be better or worse compared to 5 years ago, for example. But what you want to see is a chart regarding the forward PE, like Evolution AB, that keeps going down and down and down, like you mentioned, Emmet. And you don't want to see a chart like Fair Isaac, for example, where the evolution of the forward PE is going like you want to see a stock price go, is going up, 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 up. So just comparing the forward PE with historical average can tell you something, but it's just a first indication. But it's handy because you can do that in 10 seconds.
Mm.
Definitely
Mm.
nowadays with tools like FinChat, you just look at the
Oh yeah.
stock, chart the forward PE, and that's it.
Yeah.
But that's also
Yeah.
why I still use the other 2 models, which is the earnings growth model and the reverse DCF. Well, I love to use an earnings growth model because it's really easy, at least in theory, to calculate your expected return as an investor. And it's always equal to your EPS growth, so earnings per share growth, plus your dividend yield, plus or minus your change in the valuation. So
Mm.
to recap that, because it's really important, your expected return is always equal to the EPS growth plus the dividend yield plus or minus the change in valuation. And you can do that in practice when you take Evolution AB, for example, right now. When I use my model, well, let's say that Evolution AB, I think they can definitely grow their EPS by 10% right now.
Mm.
If you look at the dividend yield is 4.6%. Well,
Yeah.
by the way, I think I would love to see them cut the dividend and
Totally. I
just
wish
buy
they'd
back
can that
shares.
dividend. I'm glad you said that because one thing that bothers me about evolution is that they pay a dividend. So there's some dog wagging the tail wagging the dog, I should say. Obviously, they have a stakeholder who wants a dividend, but it isn't me and it isn't you.
Yeah, exactly. And share buybacks are way more tax friendly, create way more
Totally.
share value. But
Yeah.
anyway, so yeah,
Yeah. Right
we
now,
have
it's the
the
one thing I dislike about it, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Same for me. So we have for the formula EPS growth plus dividend yield plus or minus change in valuation. For Evolution AB, it's EPS growth 10%,
Mm.
dividend yield 4.6%, and
Yeah.
then the current forward PE is roughly 10. Well, I
Yeah.
think that in the end, a forward PE of 15
Mm.
could be normal. So I'm doing the math on top out of my head right now. But I always assume in this model that the valuation goes back to normal within 10 years. I think that's a
Mm.
safe thing to assume. So you ask what is a fair PE multiple for Evolution AB in this case in the long term. Well, for me, 15% is a normal one, especially given the fact how profitable they are, right? They
Mm.
convert more than 50% of their revenue into pure cash and so on. So if we do that, we have the EPS growth of 10%, plus the dividend yield 4.6%, and then plus, the valuation increasing by 50% over 10 years. Well, that's almost 5% as well. So when you do those calculations, you have an amazing expected return. The expected return, well, I don't think you should calculate with those numbers, but the expected return is roughly 20% per year. And I
Mm.
think given the fact that there's a lot of uncertainty and given the fact that it's a company active in online gaming or gambling, well,
Mm.
a large margin of safety is justified. And I'm not saying at all that they will generate a return of 20% per year, but it shows you that, yeah, the valuation looks quite cheap and the future
Mm.
still looks bright for the company. So when we have the forward PE for Evolution AB, it will be, yeah, has gone down, 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 and down, and that's interesting. The expected return regarding the earnings growth model also looks interesting. And then the third model I use is a reverse DCF. So a lot of investors might know the normal or regular DCF or discounted cash flow model, where you make assumptions about the free cash flow over the next 10 years. And
Mm.
then you are going to discount them to today.
Yeah.
Well, the more assumptions you make as an investor, the higher the chance that you make a mistake somewhere and that you're wrong. So that's why I prefer reverse DCF. Well, Charlie Munger said if you want to find the solution to a complex problem, you should invert, always invert, turn the problem upside down. So with the reverse DCF, we are not going to make assumptions ourselves, but we are going to look at what is implied in the current stock price. For this model, you probably need an Excel. I think when you Google reverse DCF compounding quality, you will find a template right away. But if you would do that exercise for Evolution AB right now, for example, you would find that in order to generate a return of 10% per year for you, Evolution AB should be able to grow its free cash flow by 3 to 4% per year on average over the next 10 years. Well, 3 to 4% per year are very low estimates, especially given the fact that the online gambling market is still growing at very high rates. So that makes me assume, well, the market thinks Evolution AB will grow by 3-4% per year.
Mm-hmm.
I personally think they will grow by way more than 3-4% per year. So as a result, the stock looks cheap if you need a return of 10% per year. And when you do the three exercises, the plotting the forward PE, the earnings growth model, and the reverse DCF, well, Evolution AB seems to be cheap on all three valuation methods, all three models. And that's what you want to see. So here the valuation definitely looks
Mm.
cheap, despite the fact, as we talked about, there are some risks involved with the company. And I also think that's a very important point to add here. Well, it was Peter Lynch who said, well, if 6 out of your 10 stock picks are great ones, you
Mm.
are a really, yeah, you are an amazing investor and you're doing really well.
Yeah.
So, Emmet, you will be wrong from time to time. I will be wrong from time to time. But it doesn't matter, because the beauty of the stock market is, well, your winners can increase by way more than 100%. And the maximum you can lose is 100%. So,
Yeah.
meaning a few big winners will drive your entire return. And by the way, I also see that with compounding quality. We have two big winners that cause us to outperform the market so far since inception. When you
Mm.
would take them away, well, the performance would be very mediocre. But I don't
Mm.
care, because I'm
Yeah.
happy and I may be a bit
Well, you
lucky
did
that you
it.
have the winners.
I'd like Peter to remind our listeners that you are flying over to Dublin on the 21st of
Yeah.
August, where I'm going to hit you on stage for your 5 absolute best investments. Actually, we've kind of advertised 3, but I know what's in your arsenal of amazing investments.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, we only need to get one of the 5 right. I will be asking you for 5 ideas that you think have something in them that could conceivably grow the value of that stock 10x. So that's a big ask for you. So without divulging your absolute favorites, let's keep that for Investicon. In fairness, we got to earn a wage around here. What can you name one company that you would buy now and hold for 10 years? Is it Evolution AB?
It could be Evolution AB. Let's also give another example, maybe, because
Yeah.
otherwise we talked about it quite a lot. One other company that truly stands out for me as well is Kinsale Capital. I'm not sure whether you know the company, Emmet.
Would you believe both of those companies have been pitched by me in Horizon and have been bought by me in Horizon? Kinsale Capital is an absolutely wonderful business, but I'll let you do the talking.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's once again, it's a great that you are thinking the same, and we are fishing in the same pond
Yeah,
apparently,
there's
because
only
it's
so
an
many
extra.
great companies, so it's not
Yeah,
shocking
exactly.
when you meet other investors who are pursue excellence that they have found similar or the same companies as you have.
Yeah, exactly. So for those who don't know the company, for those who don't know Kinsale Capital, it's a US company. It's a US insurance company, and to be more specific, they are active in E&S insurance, so excess and surplus lines. That means that they are insuring very specific risks, risks that some regular insurers don't want to take. A question that might pop up to you right now: oh, special risks, other insurers don't want to take it. Well, isn't that an extra risk? And isn't that a risky investment in that case? Well, you would think that, but what's also really important there, because those risks are so specific, well, the premiums are also way higher than a traditional car insurance, for example. And what makes Kinsale so great in this niche is, well, they have a strong technological advantage, and they are way better compared to their peers in assessing the risk and knowing how much risk a certain potential insurance is. And a fun thing there is I was in Omaha at the beginning of May for the Berkshire AGM. And there was also, you have on Sunday the lunch from Markel, which is also an insurance
Hmm.
company in the US.
Chris Gainer's, I mean
Yeah,
Tom
exactly.
Gainer's
Tom Gaynor,
organization.
indeed. And on
Yeah.
Saturday, Tom Gaynor, so the CEO of Markel, also hosted a private dinner. I was there and I was talking, and I won't give any names there, but I was talking with someone with quite a large or high position within Markel. And two questions I asked him is: the key advantage for Kinsale Capital is that they are managing everything in one platform. Markel is larger than Kinsale
Mm,
Capital. So the question you
mm.
could have is, why doesn't Markel do anything like that? Right now, they are using different platforms. That's a disadvantage, because when you are an employee, you need to log in into all those platforms, pull
Yeah.
data from different platforms, which takes way longer and makes things way more complex. Um, but they said, well, for us, everything is so embedded that it's basically impossible. So the only way we could do it is just to start from scratch again, or have a new company doing everything from scratch. But we, Markel being, we can't do that. And some person from Markel with that high role within the company, he even admitted that he had a significant stake in Kinsale, which is a competitor for them. And he even
Yeah.
compared, well,
I can see why you didn't name him.
yeah, exactly. And he even compared, well, Markel is a bit like Ryanair on some aspects, and
Mm,
then Kinsale Capital is the best, whatever luxury, yeah,
yeah.
jet company in the world. So that's interesting. And one other thing that is also there is when I sat together with Mike Wu, so he's the CEO and founder of Kinsale Capital, and
Hmm.
I asked him, well, when are you going to do all your equity investments in-house? And maybe to explain
Oh
first,
yeah.
an insurance company, they receive premiums
Yeah.
to insure a certain risk. But obviously, same with your car insurance. When you take a car insurance tomorrow or today, hopefully you won't have an accident next week. So this also means for those insurance companies, they receive all the money from the premiums for a risk that might only happen in 6, 7, or 8 years from now. So they need to do something with that money, and most of that money is invested in bonds, but a small
Mm,
part is also invested in equity. And for Kinsale Capital, well, they do all the bond investments themselves, but they outsource the equity investments to BlackRock. And I
hey Peter,
asked,
we should do that.
yeah, exactly.
You and me should do that. Hey,
We
we got
should
to make a
manage the
pitch.
equity investments.
Do that for them.
Exactly. That would be fun. But yeah, I asked him, well, when are you going to do it in-house? And he said very spontaneously,
Hmm.
well, when our equity investments triple from today's words, well, we will do everything in house, and it will be way sooner than most people think. And when he said that,
Wow.
I saw on his face, oh God, I shouldn't have
Right.
said that. I was
Yeah.
too spontaneous there. But I like the fact that Mikey was still running the business. And what's interesting is the ENS insurance business is growing faster than traditional insurance business, and Kinsale Capital wants to double its market share within the next 10 years there. So that's how you get a flywheel where things keep
It's amazing.
accelerating.
And it only
And
owns a single digit percentage of the specialty insurance market. I mean, it is such an efficient business. And as you say, that float is a ginormous pond of money that's there to make more money. It is a wonderful business. Very nice insight there, Peter. And I think
thanks.
you've suitably disguised all the relevant parties so nobody gets in trouble with that for that. You have built compounding quality into a serious platform, a wonderful service. I am absolutely thrilled and delighted you're joining us in Dublin on the 21st of August. And again, just to our listeners, investicon.ie. IE is Irish domain for websites. Investicon.ie. We have a few early bird tickets left. Finally, Peter, before I let you go to get back on with finding market beating stock investments, which you'll talk to us about when you come to Dublin, what are you most looking forward to with respect to Investicon and coming to Dublin?
Yeah, sure. I'm looking forward to coming to Dublin, and the most important thing, obviously, is to meet you. It seems like we're fishing in the same pond quite a lot, and I've always found that when you network with other investors, when there will be plenty of interesting people there, talk with them, network with them, stay in touch, share ideas. I think that's the most interesting thing, because especially in investing, well, you need to have some people you trust where you can share ideas with, and maybe, for example, if I tomorrow come to you, Emmet, I found this company, why shouldn't I invest in the company? That's so valuable. So
Yeah.
so your
Yeah.
network is your net worth. Well, it's a cliche, but I think it's exactly true. So that's why I'm always very happy to come, like, to events like Investicon.
Likewise, I'm delighted you're coming over. Peter Slegers. Emmet Savage pronounces your name perfectly well, so I can say that, and only on my podcast, copyright Emmet Savage. Peter Slegers, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us, and I'll see you in August.
It was an honor. Looking forward to seeing you.